Good morning. I am Dr. Srinivas, Professor of Finance and Dean, Head of Placement at Institute of Public Enterprise, Hyderabad. Today we are going to cover a module on capital structure and public enterprise. This module discusses the concept of capital structure planning, and capital structure decisions and the public enterprise. Part 1 deals with the concept of financial leverage and measures of financial leverage, and second part deals with the various theories of capital structure, and third part deals with the factors affecting capital structure, and the fourth part deals with the capital structure planning, and the fifth part deals with capital structure decisions and the public enterprise. Coming to the concept of capital structure decision is one of the important decisions taken by any finance managers. Finance manager, of course, takes four important decisions, namely the investment decision, the financing decision, and the dividend decision, and the working capital management. So the second important decision taken by the finance manager is the financing decision, which is also called as capital structure decision. So in this decision, basically he is going to decide what types of financing should be used to purchase the assets which have been identified under investment decision. So in investment decision, he is identifying the various types of fixed assets or the projects where you have to invest your money, or the projects which can create positive wealth, positive net present value. Having decided the projects, the next question is what combination of resources need to be used to purchase those assets or to invest in those projects. And that's the reason it is called as financing decision. It is called as capital structure decision because it discusses about the way the capital has been structured for the organization. So always the capital structure decision involves the debt equity combination, debt equity mix that a company has to follow. Now, there are different theories that talk about the capital structure decision. Before we deal with that, there is what is called as a concept of financial leverage. So financial leverage is use of fixed charge source of funds along with equity. Now, what is the advantage of financial leverage? Financial leverage is also called as trading on equity. Now, when a company wants to mobilize funds, it has different options available. Either it can go for 100% equity financing, number one. Number two, it can go for 100% debt financing. Number three, it can go for a combination of debt and equity. So financial leverage is using fixed charge source of funds along with equity. It is called as trading on equity because you have some equities available with you already, and keeping that as buffer, you want to mobilize debt. Now, why should we go for debt sources when the equity is available? And financial leverage is resorted to mainly because of three important aspects. Number one, cost of debt is always less when compared to cost of equity. Cost of debt is less mainly because of the fact that the interest payments made by the organization are tax deductible. Whatever interest charges are paid, they are tax deductible. So effectively, the cost of debt will be lower than its nominal cost. And since cost of debt is cheaper than cost of preference capital and cost of equity, always there is a tendency of companies using more debt. That's the reason we say financial leverage is use of fixed charge source of funds along with equity. Now, when it is going to be advantageous? Since financial leverage involves use of cheaper cost of debt, it helps the company in three ways. Number one, in reducing the cost of capital. When you are able to use lower cost debt, automatically your overall cost of capital can be brought down. So cost of capital can be reduced and we can increase the value of the firm. And we can also maximize the earning per share of the shareholder. Because of these advantages, many companies they go for financial leverage. And any company would always like to take maximum advantage of financial leverage. Because whatever is the performance of the company, the creditors will have charge only on the debts provided by them, right? If at all there is a share, if at all there is an increase in the profits, that goes to the owners, shareholders. So the shareholders are also willing to have certain element of debt in the total capital structure because it helps them in increasing their earning per share. Then coming to the measures of financial leverage. Basically, there are three important measures of financial leverage. They are: one, debt ratio, the ratio of debt to total capital. We say D by D plus E or D by V, where D is the value of debt, E is the value of shareholders' equity, and V is the value of the capital, that is D plus E. And D and E may be measured in terms of book value. Second important measure is debt equity ratio, that is the ratio of debt to equity, capital D by capital E. Third, interest coverage, another important. The ratio of net operating income or EBIT to interest charges, that is EBIT to interest, is another important measure of financial leverage. There are various theories of capital structure. People say whether capital structure matters at all. There is what is called as an optimum capital structure, or companies can have any capital structure they want. So there are different viewpoints made on capital structurization. So there exists conflicting theories on the relationship between capital structure and value of a firm. According to traditionalists, the capital structure affects the firm value, while Modigliani and Miller, under the assumptions of perfect capital markets, no taxes, argue that capital structure is irrelevant. So broadly, there are two important categories of theories. One saying that capital structure is relevant, another set of theories which argue that capital structure is irrelevant. Right. Coming to the capital structure relevance theories, we have theories like net income approach, the traditional theory, wherein we say that capital structure is going to be relevant because it is going to help us in reducing cost of capital and maximizing the value of the firm. First of all, we'll deal with the net income approach. Under net income approach, the cost of equity, KE, and cost of debt, KD, are constant, as the cheaper or less expensive debt is replaced for equity in the capital structure, and weighted average cost of capital decreases. Because of that, weighted average cost of capital, that is KO, decreases. The optimum capital structure occurs at that point minimum average cost of capital. Under this approach, the firm will have maximum value and minimum WSAC when it is 100% debt financing. If you look at the graph, we can easily find that. See, on the y-axis we have cost of capital, on the x-axis we have degree of leverage. You find that as the degree of leverage is increasing, cost of debt is constant and cost of equity is also constant. But with increased use of leverage, we find that overall cost of capital is coming down. So this is the effect of leverage on cost of capital under net income approach. So as you increase the amount of leverage in the company, it helps us in reducing the cost of capital. So the value of the firm is the sum of values of debt and values of equity. Then the value of equity is the discounted value of shareholder earnings, called net income. That is, E is net income divided by cost of equity. The value of debt, that is capital D, is the discounted value of debt holders interest income, that is interest divided by cost of debt. Firm's cost of capital, WSAC, is the net operating income divided by value of the firm. So net income approach clearly says that capital structure is relevant. Capital structure is relevant because it helps in reducing cost of capital and in maximizing the value of the firm. The second important theory is the traditional theory, which is also called as traditional view. According to this view, a judicious mix of debt and equity capital can increase the value of the firm by reducing the WSAC up to a certain level of debt, beyond which it starts increasing with financial leverage. Thus, the optimum capital structure for a firm occurs when WSCC, that is weighted average cost of capital, is minimum, which maximizes the value of the firm. The traditional theory can be explained in 3 stages, right? In stage 1, cost of debt and cost of equity are constant. As a result, weighted average cost of capital, that is KBO, decreases with increasing leverage and value of the firm increases. And look at this diagram, right? So on the first stage, you find that the cost of capital is coming down, right? Second stage, once the firm has reached a certain degree of leverage, increase in leverage will not have much impact on cost of capital, WSCC, and value of the firm. This is because the increase in the cost of equity due to added financial risk offsets the advantage of low cost of debt. This is the second stage where when you go for higher amount of leverage, the equity shareholders perceive risk, and because of which the cost of equity goes up. So whatever benefit you have got in the form of a lower cost of debt is offset by increasing the cost of equity, whereby making the overall cost of capital constant. The third stage, right, stage 3, beyond the acceptable limit of debt, value of the firm decreases with the leverage as WSCC increases. This is because investors perceive a high degree of financial risk and demand a higher equity capitalization rate, which is greater than the low cost of debt. Now here you find that when the company increases debt beyond such limit, then there is actually the value of the firm decrease with leverage as WSCC increase, because even you have to borrow at a higher interest rates, the cost of capital also will go up, cost of equity is high. So which all leads to increase in the overall cost of capital. This is the third stage. Everything is explained in the form of this graph, where we find at first stage you find cost of capital is coming down. Then second, when you go for further debt, cost of capital is constant. When you go take a further debt, you find that cost of debt is increasing, cost of equity is also increasing, which leads to increase in the overall cost of capital. Now, we have discussed about the capital structure relevance theories. Then we come to the capital structure irrelevance theories. The second set of theories on capital structure, they are called as capital structure irrelevance theories. So these theories, they argue that the capital structure has no impact on cost of capital and value of the firm. Broadly, there are 2 important approaches under these categories of theories. One is the net operating income approach, and second one is MM hypothesis. First one is net operating income approach. So under net operating income approach, the net operating income and the firm's opportunity cost of capital are assumed to be constant with regard to the level of debt, and the value of the firm is capitalized value of net operating income. Thus, V is equal to NY by KO. Net operating income divided by overall cost of capital. The cost of capital of the firm remains constant with increased degree of leverage, as the benefit received in the form of lower cost of debt is offset by the increased cost of equity on account of the risk perceived by the equity shareholders. If you look at this figure, you find that when on the y-axis we have cost of capital and the x-axis we are having degree of leverage. So we find that the cost of debt is constant. But when you go on increasing the leverage in the organization, financial leverage in the organization, which is actually increasing the cost of equity. So equity shareholders perceive more risk, because of that cost of equity is increasing. So whatever benefit you have got in the form of, say, lower cost of debt is offset by the increased cost of equity, making the overall cost of capital as constant. So that says that increased leverage has no impact on cost of capital under net operating income approach. And second is the MM hypothesis without tax. Modigliani and Miller, the authors who got Nobel Prize for their contributions in this particular area, they argue that capital structure theory is irrelevant. They argue that in perfect capital markets without taxes, a firm's market value and cost of capital remain invariant to the capital structure changes. So whatever is the change that may take place in capital structure, that will not have any impact on cost of capital and value of the firm. The MM hypothesis is explained in two propositions. Like according to proposition 1, for the firms in the same risk class, the total market value is independent of the debt equity mix and is given by capitalizing the expected net operating income by the capitalization rate appropriate to the risk class, where V, that is value of the firm, is net operating income divided by the firm's opportunity cost of capital. And the simple logic of proposition 1 is that two firms with identical assets, irrespective of their method of financing, cannot command different market values. In this situation, arbitrage will take place to enable investors to engage in the personal or homemade leverage as against the corporate leverage to restore equilibrium in the marketplace. Of course, MM, they have given their theory based on two propositions. So assumptions of proposition 1, of course. Assumption 1 is that the situation of perfect capital markets. They assumed that there is a perfect capital market situation where investors are free to buy or sell securities. So perfect capital market is a situation where there will be large number of buyers and sellers. No single individual buyer and seller can influence the price. Second, homogeneous risk classes. Firms within same industry constitute a homogeneous risk class. Third, risk. The operating risk is defined in terms of the variability of the net operating income. So risk is defined in terms of the variability of the net operating income. Fourth assumption is no taxes. That means there do not exist any corporate taxes. It's a very important assumption because normally when there is corporate taxes, that will make the cost of debt is cheaper. But they assume that there are no corporate taxes. Fifth one, full payout. The firms follow a 100% payout. In addition to the proposition 1, of course, they have given proposition 2. It provides justification for the levered firm's opportunity cost of capital remaining constant with financial leverage. How the opportunity cost of capital is remaining constant with increased leverage has been explained. It implies that cost of equity KE will increase enough to offset the advantage of cheaper cost of debt, so that the opportunity cost of capital does not change. A levered firm will have higher required rate of return on equity as compensation for financial risk. The cost of equity KE for a levered firm should be higher than the opportunity cost of capital, that is the leverage of that is leveraged form. That is KE is more than KE. It will be equal to constant KO plus a financial risk rate. A levered firm's cost of capital is KE equal to KA plus KA minus KD divided by D by E, capital D divided by capital E. The crucial point of proposition 2 is that the levered firm's opportunity cost of capital will not rise even with excessive financial leverage, because in practice cost of debt will increase with high level of financial leverage. You may argue that when KD increases, KE will increase at a decreasing rate and may turn down eventually because the operating risk of shareholders is transferred to debt holders. Of course, the theory given by MM was criticized because of the assumptions taken. The arbitrage process is the behavioral foundation for MM hypothesis. The shortcomings of this hypothesis lie in the assumption of perfect capital market in which arbitrage is expected to work. Due to the imperfections in the capital market, arbitrage may fail to work and may give rise to discrepancy between the market values of levered and unlevered firms. Then, relevance of capital structure, the MM hypothesis under corporate tax. Having seen the criticism for the theory considering the assumption of corporate income taxes. Then Modiglan and Miller actually they revised their theory considering corporate income taxes. According to hypothesis, the value of the firm is independent of its debt policy under the assumptions that corporate income taxes do not exist. In reality, corporate income taxes exist, and interest paid to debt holders is treated as a deductible expense. In their 1963 article, shows that the value of the firm will increase with the debt due to the deductibility of the interest charges for tax computation, and the value of the levered firm will be higher than of the unlevered firm. So finally, they also agreed that because of the tax deductibility in various countries, so it appears that cost of debt will be cheaper. So as companies take more and more debt, because of financial leveragation, it is possible for a company to lower the cost of capital and maximize the value of the firm. The next, how do firms choose their capital structures? The choice of debt equity mix is an important finance function of the business enterprise, and it is observed that firms differ significantly in their capital structure design according to Myers 1984. The possible causes for such differences may be one or more of the following. There are two important theories explained here. One is trade-off theory, which says that firms have two options, namely own funds and borrowed funds, to finance their capital expenditure or investments. Both options have relative merits and demerits, and firms will have trade-off costs against the benefits and arrive at such combination of debt and equity which will maximize the value of the firm. According to this theory, profitable firms with stable tangible assets would have high debt equity ratios than unprofitable firms with risky tangible assets. Second theory, pecking order theory. This theory says that there is a pecking order of financing under which internal financing, debt financing and equity financing are preferred in that order. So according to this theory, there is no well-defined target debt equity ratio. While the internal equity is at the top of the pecking order, the internal equity is at the bottom. This theory explains why highly profitable firms generally use little debt. They borrow little as they don't need much external finance and not because they have a low target debt equity ratio. Similarly, less profitable firms borrow more because their financing needs exceed retained earnings and debt finance comes before external equity in the pecking order. Next, what factors determining the capital structure ratio? What factors actually determine the capital structure of a company? There are various factors available. Like one is trading on equity or financial leverage. The financial leverage decision taken by the company will have impact. The amount of debt taken certainly will have impact on the capital structure of the company. The trading on equity, if the company would like to have higher financial leverage, naturally it will be going for more debt in the total capital structure, and its impact on earning per share, cost of capital becomes an important thing. So if the company wants to reduce cost of capital, naturally it will be looking for a higher financial leverage. Second, control on the company. When any company wants to keep its control intact, then there is a tendency of the company going for more debt. If it goes for more equity, then there will be dilution of equity, dilution of control. So in such cases, companies would like to go for more debt. The third is cost of financing. If cost of financing is the criteria, if the company is contemplating reducing the cost of capital, naturally it will go for a higher amount of debt which is cheaper. Next, flexibility of financial structure, right? The flexibility also will have an important bearing on the capital structure of factors. If there is a flexibility, if the company wants to have flexibility in the capital structure, then it is better to go for more and more equity. If you go for debt, the financial burden will be there on the part of the company in the form of interest payments and principal repayments. So where you cannot default on repaying this obligation. Then period of financing is also another important thing. Statutory requirements, then capital market environment. These are the various factors which determine the capital structuration of a company. If the capital market is quite conducive, then there is a tendency of companies going for more equity than debt, right? So trading on equity means that company takes the advantage of equity share capital to borrowed funds on a reasonable basis. It is based on the assumption that if the rate of interest on borrowed capital is lower than the normal rate of company's earnings, the equity shareholders will get a benefit in the form of extra profit. The control of a company is vested in the hands of a board of directors elected by the equity shareholders. Unlike equity shareholders, the debenture holders have no voting rights and the preference shareholders have only limited voting rights. If the existing equity shareholders want to retain control over the company, they should encourage debt financing rather than issue of further equity shares to public. Generally, debt is cheaper source of financing as compared to equity capital and preference capital. However, capital structure of a company should provide for the minimum cost of capital. It should be flexible enough to adjust itself according to the requirements of changing business conditions. If the company looks for funds for permanent investment, then equity share capital should be preferred rather than preference capital and debentures. While framing the capital structure, a company must ensure compliance with the requirements of the state. The environment and conditions prevailing in the capital market should be considered in determining the capital structure of a company. For example, at the time of depression, the debentures and preference share carrying a fixed rate of return may be issued easily in the market as the investing public would like to avoid risk. But in the boom period, equity shares may be issued easily as the investors would like to take risk and invest in equity shares. We have seen many such instances in the Indian corporate sector where many companies, if the market boom conditions are there, they have gone for equity, or there is any depressionary conditions, they have postponed their public issue. Or rather, it is advisable to go for a constant cost of capital like debt or preference share capital. Capital structure plan. A company should plan its capital structure immediately as soon as it gets incorporated to maximize the utilization of funds. The planning of capital structure implies selection of a desired mix of debt and equity. For this purpose, various methods with their applications need to be carefully examined. However, the fact remains that identification of desired mix of debt and equity is a very difficult task. Once it is identified, the same mix should be continued till there is a genuine need for changing of the mix. There are different methods of capital structure plan. The most common methods or approaches to determine a company's capital structure are mentioned. One is EBIT, EPS analysis. Second one is cost of capital. The third one is cash flow analysis. EBIT, EPS analysis. The relationship between EBIT and EPS is analyzed in order to determine the effect of leverage. Financial leverage or trading on equity arises when fixed assets are financed by debt capital and preference capital. If the assets are financed by the use of debt capital, the return or yield will be more than the cost of debt. As a result, the earning per share goes up without any investment from the owners. The same also applies in case of preference share capital. Second approach is the cost of capital. The cost of capital is meant by the minimum rate of return expected by investors. The return depends on the degree of risk assumed by the investors. Generally, the debt holders assume less risk than ordinary shareholders because the rate of interest is fixed, interest charges are tax deductible, and the rate of return on debt capital and interest payment is assumed. Debt is a cheaper source of finance than equity. Therefore, a company would always like to utilize debt as a source of finance if the cost of capital is considered as a criterion for financing decision. The third one is cash flow analysis. Cash flow analysis is very important in order to understand the capability of a company to meet its various commitments, including servicing of fixed charges, that is payment of interest, preference dividend, and principal repayment, etc. If a company uses a large sum of debt with short-term maturity, the fixed charges amount will naturally be high. Thus, a company which expects a large and stable cash inflow in the future period should utilize a large amount of debt in its capital structure. Therefore, expected future cash flows should be carefully examined by the company before utilizing any further debt capital. Capital structure decisions and public enterprises. The practical significance of the debt equity ratio is limited in the case of public enterprises in many countries because major portion of the loans is derived from the government itself or from public sector financial institutions. The government as the owner as well as the lender has access to all the information it needs about the financial soundness of the enterprise and does not need to refer to any favorable ratio to derive confidence before selling. Even when the public enterprises are allowed to borrow from private banks or from foreign financial institutions, there is a government guarantee that supports the logic that the loan will not be repudiated and that the enterprise financial embarrassments, if any, taken care by adoption of any appropriate policy measure. Because of those institutional arrangements for sharing risk and reducing the disadvantage of debt, it is possible to justify higher debt equity ratios for public enterprise. However, in reality, all other public enterprises are not wholly owned and financed by government, and there are many joint ventures. Since the institutional arrangements for diluting risks are not always available, public enterprises have to face the irk of the lending agencies towards these aspects of strength of their capital structure. In many a case, the parent ministries would like to proceed with a particular investment for political or other reasons, and they have to approach other ministries, example planning and finance, for a critical scrutiny and appraisal of their proposals. In any case, the government-owned financial institutions are expected to raise points about the risk of further lending to an enterprise. The debt equity ratio of whose capital structure is not line with the standards or which does not appear to be healthy in the context of its financial products. Most of the plans of investment in public enterprises, whether for replacement or rehabilitation of existing assets or for expansion and diversification, require significant amounts of foreign exchange. In cases where this resource is arranged from foreign lending agencies like the World Bank IDA, the creditors make it a point to specify adherence to a range of healthy debt equity ratios and also to a conservative dividend disbursement policy till their loans are repaid. A high proportion of equity in its capital structure is desired to be maintained because it should enable it to have freedom of action and in the matter of retaining its earnings for its self-financed projects or for financing a part of its working capital, provided, of course, that it is in the profit-making scenario. For enterprises which operate at a loss, because of government imposed pricing policies or their inefficiencies. There is usually a demand for converting at least a part of their loan capital into equity capital. When such proposals are examined, the question of a reasonable or proper debt equity ratio for the type of enterprises under consideration is raised at any time. Another issue to be considered is that with a high debt equity ratio, the initial cost of a project or a manufacturing facility put up by a public enterprise has the effect of increasing the fixed cost of operation through the capitalization of interest during construction period. So this may drag the enterprise into a difficult situation when compared to its competitors and can lead to a vicious cycle of accumulated losses, underutilization of capacity, and low morale of workers, management inefficiencies, short-term unrealistic solutions, and further losses. Once an enterprise is trapped in this situation, it is difficult to come out and rehabilitate its capital structure, as the government department ministries are not that prompt in analyzing the causes of these problems and providing the needed reliefs at appropriate time. It should be understood that the view that the practical significance of the debt equity ratio is limited in the case of public enterprises is not based on a complete appreciation of all the factors in which these enterprises have to operate in many developing countries. While comparing the private sector in this respect may have to be modified suitably when applied to the public enterprise situation in a particular country. It will remain a useful indicator both with the administrative ministries and with the enterprise management to assess the strength of their capital structure. At the end, capital structure planning is essential both for private and public sector enterprises. The principles that apply to the private enterprise as well apply to the public sector context. As the government is going towards discouraging the public sector enterprises to depend more on governmental support or budgetary support, there is a need for CEOs of public sector enterprises to closely look at these capital structure planning exercises to ensure that their cost of capital is brought to the minimum. It becomes competitive and they can succeed in a competitive world where not only the private enterprise but also multinationals they thrive. Capital structure planning is one of the important functions performed by the finance manager, who is the new avatar of Chief Financial Officer. Yeah. With this, we conclude this module on capital structure planning. So we have discussed at length what is capital structure, what is financial leverage, and what are the various theories on capital structure, what are the determinants of capital structure, and how to do the capital planning exercise, and what are the capital structure practice of public sector enterprises. This is a topic of great relevance for students of finance